It started subtly. A brightly colored sticky note adhered to my front door, its cheerful yellow clashing with the ominous message scrawled in thick black marker. Please be considerate of your neighbors. Excessive dog barking is disruptive. I frowned, peeling it off and glancing at Buster, who was sprawled, snoozing peacefully on the living room rug. He'd barked a few times that afternoon, sure, excited by a passing squirrel's standard dog behavior, I'd thought. I crumpled the note, dismissing it as an oversensitive neighbor. This was suburbia, after all. Occasional barking was par for the course, but the notes persisted. They appeared every few days, escalating in both frequency and passive aggression. Your dog's incessant barking is causing undue stress. Please rectify this situation immediately. Have you considered obedience training? It's clearly needed. Each one was signed with a flourish. Sincerely, Karen, 14 Maple Drive. Karen. The name conjured an image of perfectly coiffed hair, manicured nails, and a perpetually disapproving frown. I'd only seen her in passing, a fleeting glimpse of someone meticulously pruning her rose bushes, her gaze lingering on my slightly overgrown lawn with thinly veiled disdain. The notes were annoying, but I initially tried to be understanding. I invested in some new chew toys for Buster, stepped up his training, and even considered those ultrasonic anti-barking devices. But Karen, it seemed, possessed a superhuman ability to detect even the faintest woof. Noise complaints began appearing in my mailbox, official forms from the Homeowners Association with boxes ticked for disturbing the peace and excessive noise. The timestamps were baffling: 2:17 a.m., 5:48 a.m., 11:32 p.m. Times when Buster was invariably curled up asleep beside my bed. Then came the police visits. Officer Miller, a kind-faced man with a weary air, showed up at my door one Tuesday evening looking apologetic. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Alex," he said, "but we received a noise complaint about a barking dog." He glanced at Buster, who was gnawing on a bone with blissful indifference. "Seems quiet now," Officer Miller observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. I explained about the notes, the complaints, the impossible hours. Officer Miller listened patiently, nodding. "I'll have a word with Mrs. Karen," he promised. "Sometimes folks get a little overzealous with the rules." The visits continued, though. Each time, Officer Miller seemed more exasperated. "Mr. Alex, I understand your frustration," he admitted during one particularly late-night call. "But Mrs. Karen insists your dog is disrupting her sleep. She even provided a recording." He held up his phone, playing a tinny audio clip of what sounded vaguely like a dog barking, though whether it was Buster was debatable. The recording was the final straw. It was clearly manipulated, the barking amplified and distorted, likely captured from afar with a powerful microphone. Karen wasn't just complaining, she was actively fabricating evidence. The incessant buzzing of the doorbell ripped through the peaceful silence of 3 a.m. Groaning, I fumbled for my glasses, my heart pounding with a mix of confusion and dread. Beside me, my wife Sarah stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "What's going on?" she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "I don't know," I muttered, stumbling out of bed. "Probably another one of Karen's stunts." As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard the insistent rapping on the door again, followed by a shrill voice. "Police, open up!" My blood ran cold. This wasn't Officer Miller's weary knock. This was something else entirely. I hurried down the stairs, Sarah close behind, her face etched with worry. Through the peephole, I saw 2 uniformed officers, their expressions stern. I unlocked the door, my mind racing. "Mr. Alex?" the taller officer inquired, his voice sharp. "Yes," I replied, trying to maintain a calm facade, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "We're here responding to a noise complaint," the officer stated. "A neighbor reported excessive dog barking, disturbing the peace." I glanced back at Sarah, who was now holding a very sleepy and confused Buster. He hadn't made a peep all night. "Officer," I said, my voice tight with barely suppressed fury, "I assure you, my dog has been sleeping soundly for hours. This is harassment." The officers exchanged glances. They'd clearly been here before, likely with Officer Miller. "Sir, We have to respond to every complaint, the shorter officer explained. Can you please bring your dog inside? He is inside, I retorted, gesturing towards Buster, who yawned widely as if to emphasize the point. The taller officer sighed. Sir, we understand your frustration, but we have a procedure to follow. If the complainant is still being disturbed, we may have to issue a citation. The complainant is the one disturbing the peace, I exclaimed, my voice rising in anger. She's making false accusations, wasting your time, and harassing my family. This has been going on for weeks. The officers looked uncomfortable. They were clearly caught in the middle of a neighborly dispute that had spiraled out of control. After a brief consultation, the taller officer spoke again. Sir, we'll speak to the complainant, but I suggest you try to resolve this issue amicably. Perhaps consider some additional training for your dog. He's already well trained, I muttered, my frustration boiling over. This isn't about my dog. It's about a malicious neighbor with nothing better to do than make my life miserable. The officers offered a few more platitudes about being considerate of neighbors and respecting local ordinances before finally retreating to their patrol car. I watched them go, my hands clenched into fists, my body trembling with rage. Sarah placed a comforting hand on my arm. It's okay, Alex, she said softly. They're gone now. Let's get some sleep. But sleep was the furthest thing from my mind. As I crawled back into bed, my anger simmered, morphing into a cold, hard determination. This wasn't just a nuisance anymore. It was a war, and I was going to fight back. Karen had pushed me too far, and now she was going to face the consequences. The only question was, how far was I willing to go? Sleep eluded me. Karen's face, contorted with self-righteous indignation as she spoke to the police, kept flashing before my eyes. The injustice of it all gnawed at me. I tossed and turned, my mind a whirlwind of anger and frustration. Talking to Karen was useless. She was impervious to reason. Complaining to the HOA was equally pointless. They were more concerned with perfectly manicured lawns than actual neighborly behavior. I needed a different approach, something unconventional. A flicker of dark humor sparked in the darkness. If Karen wanted to play games, I could play them too. But I was going to play to win. I sat up, a mischievous grin spreading across my face. Sarah, I whispered, nudging her gently. I have an idea. She mumbled, half asleep. I'm going to build a deterrent. Sarah blinked, finally awake. A deterrent? What kind of deterrent? A personalized deterrent, I replied, my grin widening, one that only Karen can trigger. The next morning, fueled by coffee and a newfound sense of purpose, I retreated to my garage, my sanctuary of tools and half-finished projects. My background in electrical engineering, usually reserved for tinkering with gadgets and building the occasional robot, was about to take a decidedly petty turn. I pulled out my laptop and began researching motion sensors, sound systems, and, well, let's just say unconventional deterrents. The idea for the Karen detector began to take shape. It wouldn't be just a simple motion sensor. It would be a sophisticated system, meticulously calibrated to detect only Karen. Facial recognition software, perhaps? Or maybe something even more subtle, like gait analysis. The thought of Karen's distinctive power walk triggering my countermeasures filled me with a perverse sense of satisfaction. But the Karen detector needed more than just detection. It needed a response. A simple alarm wouldn't do. It had to be something memorable, something Karen-esque. The thought struck me like a bolt of lightning. Air horns. Loud, obnoxious, and utterly impossible to ignore. And to add the perfect touch of pettiness, a custom recording. Something short, sweet, and dripping with irony. Attention. Karen detected, I muttered to myself, testing the phrase aloud. Warning. Excessive complaining in progress. Perfect. It was passive-aggressive, it was humorous, and it was just the right amount of petty. Over the next few days, the garage became my laboratory. Wires snaked across the floor. Circuit boards glowed under the harsh fluorescent light, and the air was thick with the smell of solder. I worked tirelessly, driven by a combination of frustration and a strange sense of artistic inspiration. The Karen detector was becoming more than just a deterrent. It was a statement, a declaration that I wasn't going to be bullied in my own home. And if I was being honest, it was also incredibly fun. The Karen detector, in its final form, was a marvel of petty engineering. It wasn't just a collection of air horns. It was a carefully orchestrated symphony of annoyance, designed to target one specific individual. The air horns themselves were strategically placed around my property, nestled amongst the shrubbery and disguised as garden lights. They weren't your average, ear-splitting foghorns. These were custom-modified, their sound slightly higher-pitched, more Karen-esque. The real genius, however, lay in the detection system. Forget simple motion sensors. I'd delved into the world of computer vision and biometrics. A network of discreetly hidden cameras, disguised as birdhouses and garden ornaments, constantly scanned my property. These weren't just capturing video. They were analyzing it, frame by frame. The system employed a combination of facial recognition. Karen's perpetually disapproving visage was now permanently etched in its memory banks, and for an added touch of absurdity, gait analysis. I'd spent hours studying Karen's distinctive power walk, the way her arms swung, the precise angle of her stride. The Karen detector could now identify her from 100 yards away, even if she was wearing a disguise, a contingency I hadn't ruled out. And then there was the recording. Oh, the recording. I'd spent a considerable amount of time perfecting it, tweaking the inflection, adding just the right amount of ironic detachment. "Attention, Karen detected," the voice would announce, smooth and professional, like a public service announcement. "Warning, excessive complaining in progress. Please proceed with caution." I'd even added a subtle, almost imperceptible echo to the Karen part, just to emphasize the point. The installation was a meticulous process. Each air horn had to be precisely positioned to maximize its impact, while minimizing the chance of accidentally triggering on, say, a passing squirrel. The cameras needed to be angled just right to capture Karen's face and gait without being too obvious. And the wiring. Oh, the wiring. It snaked its way through my garden like a metallic vine, a testament to my dedication to this project. Testing the system was a comedy of errors. I initially triggered it myself, walking around my property with a cardboard cutout of Karen's face taped to a stick. The air horns blared, the recording played, and my dog, Buster, looked at me with a mixture of confusion and concern. I tweaked the sensitivity, adjusted the facial recognition parameters, and refined the gait analysis algorithms until the system was finally perfectly calibrated. It was a work of art, a masterpiece of petty revenge. Now, all that was left was to wait. I sat on my porch, sipping a glass of iced tea, a sense of anticipation building in my chest. It was only a matter of time before Karen ventured into my yard again, drawn by some perceived infraction, some imagined violation of her meticulously crafted rules. And when she did, the Karen detector would be waiting. The moment finally arrived. I was tending to my slightly overgrown rose bushes, a deliberate act of defiance against Karen's pristine lawn aesthetic, when I saw her. Karen. She was marching up my driveway, her shoulders squared, her expression a thundercloud of disapproval. She was carrying a small, brightly colored flag, probably another passive-aggressive note disguised as a garden marker. My heart quickened. Showtime. As Karen crossed the invisible threshold into the Karen detector's zone of influence, the system sprang to life. Whoosh! The first air horn blared, its high-pitched shriek echoing through the quiet neighborhood. Karen stopped dead in her tracks, her head snapping around as if she'd been stung by a bee. She looked around, her eyes narrowed with suspicion, trying to pinpoint the source of the noise. "Attention, Karen detected." the smooth, professional voice announced from the hidden speakers. Warning, excessive complaining in progress. Please proceed with caution. Karen's face registered a flicker of confusion. She blinked, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowing. She took a tentative step forward. Whoosh! Another air horn blasted, closer this time. Karen jumped, a small, involuntary yelp escaping her lips. What in the? She muttered, her eyes darting around frantically. She spotted one of the garden lights and approached it cautiously. As she got closer, whoosh! The air horn erupted again, followed by the now familiar announcement. Karen's confusion morphed into anger. Her face flushed crimson, her lips pursed into a tight line. She glared at the garden light as if it had personally insulted her. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. She took another step, then another. Each step was met with a deafening blast from the air horns and the relentlessly polite, yet undeniably mocking, recording. Her frustration escalated with every whoosh. She started stomping her feet, her power walk now more of a frustrated march. She waved her little flag in the air as if trying to swat away the sound. She even tried covering her ears, but the air horns were strategically placed to ensure maximum auditory assault. Finally, she gave up. She turned and stomped back down my driveway, her perfectly coiffed hair now slightly askew, her perfectly manicured composure completely shattered. But she wasn't defeated. She was regrouping. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, plotting her next move. She reached the edge of my property, then stopped, turned and glared at my house. Then, in a move of pure Karen-ness, she walked right up to me. "Mr. Alex!" she screeched, her voice trembling with indignation. "What is the meaning of this?" She gestured wildly in the general direction of the hidden air horns, her little flag flapping uselessly in the breeze. "Are you deliberately trying to torment me?" "Torment you, Karen?" I feigned innocence, leaning against my porch railing, a smirk playing on my lips. "Whatever do you mean?" "This," she sputtered, gesturing towards the hidden air horns. This infernal racket. It's unbearable. And that ridiculous recording." "Ah, you mean my new security system," I replied calmly. "It's designed to deter unwanted visitors." "Unwanted visitors?" Karen's voice reached a new octave. "I'm your neighbor. I'm simply trying to discuss important matters with you." "By trespassing on my property and leaving passive-aggressive notes?" I countered, raising an eyebrow. "I believe I've made it clear that I'm not interested in your input." Karen's face contorted with rage. "This is harassment!" she shrieked. "I'm going to report you to the HOA!" "Be my guest," I said, stifling a laugh. "I'm sure they'll be fascinated to hear about your extracurricular activities." Karen spun on her heel and stormed off, muttering threats under her breath. I watched her go, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. The Karen detector was working perfectly. But Karen, as I'd come to expect, was nothing if not persistent. Over the next few days, I observed her from my window, her movements becoming increasingly erratic. She tried approaching my house from different angles, creeping along the edge of my property line, even attempting to scale my fence, a feat that ended with a rather undignified tumble. Each time, the Karen detector sprang to life, the air horns blaring, the recording mocking her every move. I, of course, was thoroughly enjoying the spectacle. It was like watching a particularly absurd game of whack-a-mole, with Karen as the mole and the air horns as the mallet. I even started taking bets with myself on how long it would take her to trigger the system each time. But I wasn't just a passive observer. I was an active participant in this little game. As Karen's tactics grew more desperate, so did my countermeasures. I added more air horns, strategically placed to create a surround sound effect. I updated the recording, adding new lines like, "Warning, Karen's frustration levels are critically high. Please evacuate the area." And for the grand finale, I installed a series of motion-activated spotlights, turning my front yard into a dazzling, albeit slightly terrifying, light show every time Karen got too close. The neighborhood, needless to say, was thoroughly entertained. Curtains twitched, heads peeked out from behind blinds, and the occasional muffled chuckle could be heard as Karen's attempts to outsmart the Karen detector became increasingly elaborate and increasingly futile. It was, without a doubt, the most entertaining week of my life. Karen, defeated but not deterred, escalated her campaign. A formal complaint, typed in an elaborate font and filled with underlined words for emphasis, landed in the HOA's digital inbox. It painted a picture of a peaceful resident, herself, naturally, tormented by an inconsiderate neighbor with a blatant disregard for community harmony. The unbearable noise, she claimed, was disrupting her tranquility, causing her severe emotional distress and diminishing property values. She demanded immediate action, citing various bylaws and regulations with the authority of someone who had clearly spent far too much time reading HOA rulebooks. The HOA board, a collection of mostly well-meaning but somewhat officious individuals, found themselves in a predicament. On one hand, they were obligated to address resident complaints, especially those as passionately worded as Karens. On the other hand, they were weary of neighborly squabbles and generally hesitant to intervene unless absolutely necessary. Mr. Henderson, the HOA president, a retired accountant with a penchant for bureaucracy, sighed as he forwarded Karen's complaint to the rest of the board. "Another one," he typed in the accompanying email. "Seems Mr. Alex has installed some sort of noise deterrent. Anyone else getting a sense of déjà vu?" Mrs. Peterson, a retired teacher known for her no-nonsense approach, replied within minutes. "That woman is a menace. I've told her countless times that her petunias are encroaching on the sidewalk, but she just ignores me. Rules are rules, I say." Mr. Johnson, a young entrepreneur who mostly attended meetings via Zoom with his camera off, chimed in with a more neutral stance. "Perhaps we should just ask Mr. Alex to tone it down a bit. We don't want to stifle innovation, but—" The discussion went on for days, emails flying back and forth, opinions clashing, and bylaws being quoted with the fervor of religious scripture. Meanwhile, the Karen detector continued its symphony of annoyance, much to my amusement and Karen's escalating frustration. The HOA, caught in the crossfire, seemed paralyzed by indecision. The HOA finally scheduled a meeting to address the noise complaint. I arrived prepared, not with apologies or explanations, but with a carefully crafted defense. I presented myself not as a nuisance, but as a victim, a homeowner simply trying to protect his property from, well, let's just say unwanted attention. "Members of the board," I began, my voice calm and measured, "I understand there have been concerns raised about noise emanating from my property. I want to assure you that I take these concerns seriously. That's why I've invested in a state-of-the-art security system." I gestured towards a large screen I'd set up, displaying footage from my security cameras. "This system," I explained, "is designed to detect and deter potential intruders. It utilizes advanced motion sensors and other proprietary technology to ensure the safety of my family and my property." The screen showed a series of clips. Karen, lurking near my property line, peering into my windows, even attempting to open my gate, which, thankfully, was locked. The footage was carefully edited, of course, focusing on Karen's more suspicious behavior, omitting any context that might explain her presence, like, say, her obsession with my rosebushes. I even added a dramatic soundtrack to emphasize the suspense. "As you can see," I continued, "this individual has repeatedly approached my home, often at odd hours, for no apparent reason. This behavior has caused me considerable anxiety. I felt I had no choice but to take measures to protect myself." The HOA members watched the footage with growing concern. Mr. Henderson frowned, Mrs. Peterson gasped, and even Mr. Johnson seemed to have perked up. Karen, who was also present, sputtered indignantly. That's taken out of context," she protested. "I was just—" "Just what, Karen?" I interrupted smoothly. "Just admiring my landscaping? Just checking to make sure my garbage cans are properly placed? Or perhaps," I added with a touch of sarcasm, Just casing the joint?" Karen glared at me, her face a mask of fury. The HOA members, however, were now looking at her with a mixture of suspicion and unease. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Mr. Alex," he said, "this footage is concerning. But what about the noise? The complaint mentions air horns and a recording?" Yes," I replied. "The audio deterrent, a crucial part of the security system. It's designed to discourage intruders from lingering on my property. It's quite effective, I must say." "Effective and loud," Karen muttered. "Effective and necessary," I countered. The HOA members exchanged glances. They were clearly torn. On one hand, Karen was a longtime resident, a pillar of the community, albeit a rather nitpicky one. On the other hand, the footage I'd presented painted a rather different picture. Finally, Mrs. Peterson spoke up. "Mr. Alex," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice, "can you show us the unedited footage?" I hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "Certainly," I replied, as if I had nothing to hide. I played the full, unedited recordings. The HOA members watched in stunned silence as Karen's obsessive behavior was laid bare. They saw her pacing along my property line, binoculars in hand, scrutinizing every detail. They saw her exaggerated reactions to Buster's occasional barks, her dramatic clutching of her chest as if she were having a heart attack. And they saw her numerous attempts to tamper with my property, including trying to disable my security cameras with a garden gnome. The room was silent when the footage ended. Karen was speechless, her face pale. The HOA members, however, were trying to suppress their laughter. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, a smile playing on his lips. "Mr. Alex," he said, "your security system is quite innovative." "Thank you," I replied modestly. "And effective," Mrs. Peterson added, chuckling. "Indeed," Mr. Johnson agreed, finally turning his camera on and grinning. The HOA's perspective had shifted. They realized Karen was the actual problem, not me, and they had to admit the Karen detector was a stroke of, albeit petty, genius. The HOA's verdict was swift and decisive. Karen received an official warning letter, hand-delivered by a stern-faced Mr. Henderson. It cited her repeated and unwarranted intrusions onto my property, her false accusations regarding noise complaints, and her general disruptive behavior within the community. It concluded with a thinly veiled threat of further action, including fines and possible legal repercussions, should her behavior persist. Karen's reaction was a spectacle to behold. She stormed into the HOA office, her face a mask of indignant fury, the warning letter clutched in her hand like a burning torch. She railed against the injustice, the blatant disregard for her rights, and the conspiracy against her. She claimed she was the victim, the one being harassed, the one whose peace was being disrupted. She even attempted to present her meticulously documented evidence of Buster's barking, complete with timestamps and audio recordings, which, upon closer inspection, sounded suspiciously like a distressed seagull. The HOA board, however, remained unmoved. They'd seen the unedited footage, they'd heard the Karen detector in action, and they'd had enough of Karen's antics. Mr. Henderson, usually a mild-mannered man, stood his ground, his voice firm. "Mrs. Karen," he said, "we've reviewed all the evidence, and we've come to a decision. Your behavior is unacceptable. You need to respect your neighbor's privacy and stop making false accusations." Karen sputtered, her face turning an interesting shade of puce. She tried to argue, to plead, to threaten, but her words fell on deaf ears. The HOA board had made up their minds. She was dismissed with a final warning and a stern reminder to be a good neighbor. Karen stormed out of the office, defeated and humiliated. Her reign of terror was over. The Karen detector had not only protected my property, but had also exposed her true nature to the entire community. She was no longer the respected HOA enforcer. She was the neighborhood joke, the Karen who couldn't handle a little noise. And I, the once tormented neighbor, was now the unlikely hero, the one who had finally put her in her place. Emboldened by the HOA's ruling, I decided to take things a step further. The Karen detector wasn't just a security system. It was a cultural phenomenon waiting to happen. I rebranded it officially, complete with a logo, a stylized silhouette of Karen recoiling from an Airhorn blast, and a catchy tagline: "The Karen detector, protecting your peace of mind, one Karen at a time." I created a website, complete with testimonials, mostly from my other neighbors, who were now openly celebrating Karen's downfall, and a detailed explanation of the system's features. Of course, I omitted the more unconventional aspects of the detection technology. Facial recognition and gait analysis were replaced with vague descriptions of advanced biometric sensors and proprietary pattern recognition algorithms. I wanted to sell the sizzle, not the steak. I also launched a social media campaign, sharing humorous videos of Karen triggering the system. The videos, captured by my strategically placed security cameras, were edited to emphasize the comedic timing of the Airhorn blasts and the recording. I even added captions like, "When Karen meets karma," and "Don't be a Karen. Get a Karen detector." The response was overwhelming. The Karen detector went viral. The videos were shared and reshared across every platform, becoming a symbol of standing up to unreasonable neighbors. People from all walks of life, it seemed, had their own Karen stories to tell, and they embraced the Karen detector as a form of catharsis, a way to laugh at the absurdity of it all. My inbox was flooded with messages. People were asking where they could buy their own Karen detector, how much it cost, and if I offered installation services. Some even shared their own Karen encounters, asking for advice on how to deal with their own difficult neighbors. The demand was so high that I realized I had a potential business on my hands. I contacted a patent attorney and began the process of securing the intellectual property rights to the Karen detector. I started exploring manufacturing options, researching potential investors, and even brainstorming new features for future models. A built-in Karen repellent diffuser, perhaps. The possibilities were endless. Meanwhile, Karen's reputation was in tatters. She became the subject of ridicule in the neighborhood and online. Her name became synonymous with overbearingness and entitlement. People whispered about her behind her back. Children pointed and giggled when she walked by, and even her meticulously manicured lawn became a source of amusement. The consequences of her actions extended beyond mere social embarrassment. The HOA, under pressure from other residents, began reviewing her past actions as president. They discovered a series of questionable decisions, including misappropriation of funds for community beautification projects, which mostly seemed to benefit her own property, and the selective enforcement of rules based on personal vendettas. Depending on how far you want to take the story, she could face further repercussions, ranging from fines and expulsion from the HOA to, in more extreme scenarios, legal action. Her carefully constructed world of control and order had crumbled, and the Karen detector was the instrument of her downfall.